Here we go. Okay. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining. My name is Julio Valdivieso. I am the Assistant Chair of the Social Justice Committee of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity's Jersey City Alumni Chapter. We're here today, as you see, to discuss the 8 police reforms that we've proposed to the city of Jersey City. And we have some great panelists today. I'm really excited to hear what they have to say. And I look forward to a productive discussion. So before we kick over to them and start the heart of the discussion, I feel it'd be useful to set the table a little bit, how we got here. So last year, we were pretty frustrated, as I imagine a lot of people were, about the events that continue to gain national attention. Ahmaud Arbery's killing, Breonna Taylor's killing, George Floyd's killing, and we decided rather than just be frustrated about it, be angry, we wanted to do something about it. So the first thing we started with was research. And as you see, these are some of the things that we started educating ourselves about before we went forward. I draw attention specifically, these were very instructive because they kind of changed the lay of the land as these things were developing last year, the New Jersey Attorney General's directives, and we'll come back to them. We hosted a virtual community discussion. As some of you may remember, you were in attendance. This is what the flyer looked like. We wanted to not just dive into start changing things. We wanted to see if there was really a problem, what people felt. We had looked online and found that the police department at that time, the JCPD's latest stats that they had posted for internal affairs was from 2018. They reflected 150 total complaints against the department, many of which were not substantiated, and only like 15 of them were excessive force. So we hosted this virtual community discussion to kind of take the temperature and see anecdotally if Jersey City residents felt that what was online was reflected by their actual experiences with police. And we found that there was a lot of room for improvement. So we'll get into that going forward. So we also, during that time, we reached out to Jersey City Police Department, or actually to the mayor and to the director of public safety, the director of the police, and requested the relevant policies and SOPs. We asked them, hey, these are the reforms that we've been reading about and that we've been thinking about, asking to be implemented, but we want to know what exists. We got no response. So then we went to Oprah requests. And by the way, this is, I want to give an early shout out because 2 of them are our panelists. So we consulted with a bunch of social activists that had great experience in doing this, who were able to point us in the right direction. And this is what they said: if they're not answering, they're not going to tend to answer, run Oprah requests. And we got our information that we wanted. We got the SOP for the use of force for Jersey City Police Department. And I'm not sure why that's not posted publicly. No police department does that, but it should be. In any case, it's public information and you could get it. These are some of the things, by the way, that we were able to check off the list of things that we wanted to see happen, and they've already kind of been covered. And that new New Jersey Attorney General's policy on the use of force that came out in December, this past December, changed the game again while we were in the middle of demanding these things, and required a lot of the things that we're asking for. In fact, all of these things were required by that. So I won't dwell on those, because what we really want to get to is these are the 8 police reforms that we came to that we wanted to see happen in Jersey City. And I'll get back to those in a second. We built a coalition of other organizations that agreed with us. Again, Pam Johnson's Anti-Violence Coalition, one of our panelists, and also Reverend Boyer's Salvation and Social Justice. Again, not just helpful on the research side, they joined us in the fight. And we're happy to see them here today on the panel, and I'll get to them in a second. So tonight's purpose is just to enable the further understanding of the 8 reform proposals that we put on the table. We have a petition going to show public support for it. We feel that'll put pressure on the mayor and the city council to engage in these discussions. Again, we haven't even got to the table where we could talk about these, and so that's why this is important. So if you agree with what you see here today and you want to join in the petition, it's right there, jerseycitynoops.com. Also, if you're a part of an organization that you feel might want to join this effort, please contact us afterwards. We'd like to convince Jersey City officials to meet about the implementation. So hopefully, there's somebody, some of them said they might show up tonight. In any case, we plan on posting the videos. So afterwards, they'll be able to, join, adjust, maybe come to the table based on this. We'd also like to inspire a ripple effect for other jurisdictions. Jersey City is the second largest city in the state of New Jersey, as many of you know, and if we can instill progressive police reform here, it could happen other places. Again, other people have already started asking, and if you're from another jurisdiction and tuning in, hey, we are more than willing to talk to you about our efforts, lessons learned, and how we can maybe join forces. Going forward, for the rest of the discussion, I'm about to cut over to the panelists because you guys didn't show up to hear me talk. You showed up to hear these great panelists talk. But I ask questions in the chat, please. If they are something we can fit in at the moment that we're answering, then I'll have either Josh or Mwanza can jump in and suggest them. Otherwise, we can answer them at the end of the forum. There'll be a time for the end of that. All right. So without further ado, let's get into who our panelists are. All right. First, we have Lieutenant Fernandez Massenberg, New Jersey State Police, retired, 58 years old, born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's been married for 13 years. He has 2 children, Willow, 13, and Logan, 11. He has a BA in criminal justice from Temple University. He also has a master's in human resources, training and development from Seton Hall. He was a Philadelphia police officer for 8 years, and he was a New Jersey state trooper for 20 years. He's a certified instructor trainer and certified interviewer and interrogator, and a certified dispute settlement mediator, certified bias crimes investigator. He's also a member of our Burlington Camden alumni chapter. He's a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Very proud of him. He's also a member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, aka NOBLE. Another thing that he's part of, that through NOBLE and Kappa Alpha Psi, this partnership, we have a Learn to Live program that addresses 3 key subject matters, and they teach it with a focus on youth. That's law enforcement and community policing is one, individuals' legal rights, and the third is to equip attendants with a set of law enforcement rules of engagement, which include recommended legal steps to follow in the event that an individual feels as though his or her rights have been violated. And last, I think what I got from it is really the title is most important, right? It's Black officers teaching other young Black and brown men and women how to survive these police encounters. Welcome, Brother Massenberg. Thank you so much for joining us. Anything you want to say about anything I missed?
No, sir. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very, thankful that you included me on this discussion. I think it's one that needs to be had, and hopefully this will gain some traction, and we can actually take this thing on the road and get some changes made. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And next, our next panelist, Reverend Charles Boyer. And Reverend Boyer, sorry, let me switch this over to the screen. Reverend Boyer is a 3rd-generation African Methodist Episcopal preacher. He's the pastor of Bethel AME Church in Woodbury, New Jersey, and the founder of Salvation and Social Justice, a nonpartisan Black faith-rooted organization that believes liberation should precede legislation and prophetic vision should precede public policy. Dr. Boyer is a leading faith voice in New Jersey for racial justice issues, the campaign to abolish the drug war, and the criminalization of Black people. His advocacy has led to the statewide adoption of racial impact analysis for sentencing, closure of youth prisons, voting rights restoration for people on probation and parole, the independent prosecutor law, and restricting solitary confinement. He led the campaign to free thousands of incarcerated people from New Jersey's deadly prison due to the coronavirus, making it the largest singular decarceration event in the state's history. Reverend Boyer works closely with the Black Legislative Caucus and is a co-convener of the United Black Agenda and the New Jersey Black Multi-Faith Alliance. He's been recognized as one of New Jersey's 25 most influential African Americans by the South Jersey Journal, a game changer by the NAACP. He's been called a torchbearer by the ACLU, a movement maker by NJ Working Families, and a community servant by New Jersey Citizens Action. He's been recognized by the New Jersey Work Environment Council and received the Making Democracy Work Award by the League of Women Voters. He's named number 4, number 4 on the 25 people to watch in 2019 by New Jersey Advanced Media for his work around police accountability, and is a 2020 Jefferson Award recipient. He is a family man as well. He's married to Rosalie, and they have 3 children, Shayna, Kyle, and Jaden. More than anything, Reverend Boyer is passionate about the spiritual disciplines, especially prayer and meditation. He rises early every morning to commune with God and seek guidance. His favorite scripture is Psalms 27:13. I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Dr. Boyer, it's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for joining us, sir. Is there anything I missed or that you'd like to say?
No, sir. It's a great privilege to be with you. And I, just expressing how much deep appreciation that I have for you and for the great Kappas. I'm not a brother, but my son is a proud Kappa, so I guess that makes me an uncle.
Nice.
So praising God for this great organization and for the great work that you're doing.
We greatly appreciate you, and we greatly appreciate your presence here. And last but not least, our final panelist, Pamela N. Johnson, MPA. She is a community activist and anti-violence advocate in Jersey City, New Jersey. She's the founder of the Anti-Violence Coalition of Hudson County and the co-founder and executive director of the Jersey City Anti-Violence Coalition movement, which addresses the needs of public safety through various programs and initiatives that focus on preventing violence and improving the quality of life for all residents. She received her master's degree in public administration from St. Peter's University, where she also received her bachelor's degree in social sciences, graduating cum laude. Pamela is currently pursuing a second master's degree in communication and public relations at St. Peter's University. As a lifelong resident of Jersey City, her parents raised her to know the struggles of others and to be an advocate to those who need it the most. Pamela has spent her career deeply committed to improving the quality of life throughout Jersey City and serving our most vulnerable communities. She believes strongly in investing in people and leading a progressive movement that focuses on moving communities forward. It's about standing together to do better for the entire community. This is a motto for every facet of her life. She believes in it and lives by it. And definitely when you think Jersey City and any kind of social justice activism in Jersey City, it's Pam Johnson's name always comes up as one of the front runners. Definitely somebody you should at the very least consult with, and in the best circumstances, she's on your side like she is on ours. Thank you so much for joining us, Pam.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I know several Kappas and I love you guys. You do great work. Continue to push forward on the mission and the movement. I just do want to say that I'm a lifelong resident of Jersey City, raised my children here. I'm raising a grandchild here, and hopefully more generations of children to see what a beautiful life you can have in Jersey City. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, let's start the discussion. Let's get into it. The first one is kind of a softball. All right, and it's kind of a softball because, as we talked about, the New Jersey Attorney General has directed in December 2020 through Directive 2020-13 and his use of force policy that officers will de-escalate situations when reasonably possible. Okay, this is not currently in the Jersey City. Well, it's mentioned in the Jersey City SOP. That they should de-escalate, but it's not seen as a requirement the way that it is right now. It's right now it's the force continuum is going. You shouldn't go to the next level unless you reasonably need to, but there's not an affirmative requirement in the SOP that will force an officer to actually actively try to de-escalate the situation. So let's get into the importance of this and why this is a game changer. And why Jersey City needs to jump on this and implement this in a progressive way. So I'll open up the floor to any of the three of you who want to jump in and start this off.
Well, I'll start in. Of course, when the police are called for anything, people need assistance. They're in trouble and they need some assistance. And it's the law enforcement's job to try to help them with a solution that will make things better, their situation better. So yes, we as police officers, that is never really talked about because it's usually a situation where we're not so much said, but kind of just kind of, it's not said, but it's more of a situation where you dominate and control. But we have to change our mindset. Too many things have been just piled on a bad foundation when it comes to policing. So we have to strip away some of these layers and some of these thoughts, and just really address the fact that policing is about helping people, being one with the community, and trying to make a situation better. So absolutely right. I believe in what you say. I think it's something that has to be emphasized a little bit more, so people will actually have that in forefront of their minds. Because so many times before officers even get there, they already have a mindset that they're trying to, dominate, control the situation without actually listening and understanding what is going on. Because people are calling you for help. They're not calling you so you can make the situation worse. They're calling you for help.
Absolutely. Any of our other panelists, you want to jump in on that?
I mean, I think when you're talking about de-escalation, it's a major, it can be a major impact on how the situation is controlled or not controlled, or what the outcome is. I've seen in so many cases in Jersey City where a little bit of just a conversation and a level of respect could have de-escalated a situation. A lot of times, lately we see so many things on camera, so many videos. But there are things that's happening that no video is captured, but the community sees it. And I've been in those situations where we see, the escalation of things as opposed to trying to find that medium to where as though everyone gets to go home safely, right? Because that's what we want. I know officers want to go home safely, but so do community members. We want to make sure we make it back home to our families. And we've seen officers antagonize individuals to get them to do something else, or do something that will warrant a search, or warrant an arrest, or warrant that extra level of just escalation, and it shouldn't be that way. And we want to make sure that we are, holding people accountable for de-escalating situations. You're not there to make things worse, but in turn, make things better for everyone. So there's a safe departure and a safe resolution to everything happening. So that's a major component in what needs to happen in Jersey City.
Thank you. Reverend Boyer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much left to be said. I totally agree. I think my role here today is best served kind of giving a statewide look. We as a statewide organization depend on folks like the Kappas of Jersey City, you, Julio, Sister Johnson, who are on the ground. We learn from you all, and that helps inform how we advocate on the state side. And as you mentioned, this is a major component of the Attorney General's use of force guidelines, which came out in December, which we advocated for vigorously, a lot of the pieces in there. And number 2 on those guidelines references this very piece. But what's interesting is the very first component, which is the sanctity of human life. And if that becomes, and to back up a little bit, I think also the role of a faith leader coming in to speak about, right, the sanctity of human life, the divine image in every single person, and that deserves time. One thing that I've learned, particularly coming up through the Black church, is that the best food is cooked slow. And when we show up in situations and we rush it, and just to be very clear, a lot of times just the presence of police officers causes anxiety in a lot of situations, and a lot of the situations are not even violent ones. So the very presence of police causes anxiety in the situation. And so if officers realize that and use time and space, which are a lot of the things that are in the Attorney General's guideline, and first and foremost, a guiding principle about the sanctity of human life, then a whole lot of situations can end up with everybody alive on the other side if there's not a rush to resolve it in using time and space. as means to allow people and allow the space to let the energy come down.
Absolutely. Good point. And something else, just to piggyback for what you said, Reverend, there's actually the word dignity is used in the Attorney General's directive, which is not in the Jersey City SOPs. So I think that's important that when we go to revise those, that be in there as well. The respect for the dignity of the citizens. At this time, I just want to point out, recognize Councilman Lavaro has joined our audience. Really appreciate you, sir. You've been nothing but supportive and proactive. So just wanted to acknowledge his presence and taking the time to show up and listen to citizens' concerns. All right, so it looks like we've covered the first of the 8 demands. And by the way, I've been told that hopefully I have it on speaker view for myself. Hopefully that's also happening for everybody else in the chat, right? Or everybody else in the screen. I don't know if one of the panelists, are you seeing speaker view? Or is it still the gallery view?
We see everyone.
You see everyone?
Well, I do.
Yeah, because I have mine on speaker view and for some reason it didn't translate to the audience. So I apologize for that.
That's fine.
Yeah, so I think you could set it individually. All right, moving on. So I'm going to go to the next one of the demands. Holding officers who failed to prevent or stop illegal or inappropriate force by other officers or those who failed to report these incidents to be just as liable administratively as the officers who used illegal or inappropriate force. So one of the, as we noted before, one of the things that we were glad to see was that there was mention in the SOPs of a affirmative or of a duty for officers to if they saw something going on, saw another officer using illegal force, that they could that they would be required to jump in and stop it. But what it was in, it's right now, it's currently in the policy, like the background section to the SOP instead of in the main body, which is a little bit concerning. And also there is we wanted to go an extra step, right? And it's not just the duty, but also letting them know this second part that's key, to be that they will be liable administratively the same as the officer who actually committed the conduct that they failed to prevent, stop, or report. And so I guess I'll throw it back over to the panel. Please jump in if anybody has any thoughts about this. Practical implications of it, the importance of it.
I remember, being in college as an undergrad, and I remember being in criminology class, and we were talking about, the obligations of bystanders and what bystanders are responsible to do, or not to do, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And, there was a whole experiment, where someone was yelling outside and no one in the building failed to call 911 or even failed to answer the calls of the young lady who was screaming outside, who was being raped. And so there was a lot of emphasis put on the obligations of witnesses and bystanders to do something. And if we're going to say and do that, then we should certainly obligate, and our officers should be responsible for the conduct of their fellow officers if you are witnessing such behavior that is unbecoming of an officer. And so when you put that responsibility on an individual, they won't think that they have an out by saying simply, like, I didn't know what was going on. You're right there and you're witnessing everything, and you are just as liable as they are. And so I think when you shift that responsibility to everyone involved who has that badge and that gun, you kind of change the dynamics of it all. And maybe that will change how people think their behavior should be and what they should report. We had a whole situation in Jersey City a couple of years ago with, officers stealing time, and all the way to the chief, so everyone's accountable, but the chief, he was leading that, and he failed to be accountable for his officers who were doing the opposite of what they were saying they were doing. And I think it's a good thing that we do that, because everyone needs to be held accountable for their behavior, especially if you're witnessing behavior unbecoming of an officer.
Reverend Boyer, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could put it any better. That's really it. You can't. At the end of the day, the current way that much of law enforcement operates is like a gang, or like, you know, it's like they have snitches get stitches policies, right? And it's absurd. The key to the whole piece is accountability. And I always say, to whom much is given, much is required, right? This is a religious concept. And so what's taking place is you have officers literally witnessing what by any other standards would be a crime. They're witnessing an assault upon people and doing nothing, which by the very nature of who they are supposed to be shows that that to do anything otherwise is a lack of integrity, and is only made legal by the unjust mechanisms of the law that gives law enforcement the ability to abuse, beat down, and kill almost with impunity. And so to bring this further together, to make a duty to intervene and to have an accountability measure to it. The one piece that I would always advocate for the stars, right, is that we at some point go beyond administratively, but also make it criminally liable the same way, because that's the standard that's given to the average citizen. And certainly people who are given the ability to take people's lives, given the legal right to take people's lives, should have a higher threshold of accountability.
Lieutenant Massenberg, do you think from the perspective of the, you know, practical implications and perspective as a former officer, do you think it's harsh to, is it too harsh to say we're going to hold them the same administratively, you know, no matter what?
No, I don't think so. I agree with both what both people said, both of our panelists said. It's a fine line that you walk as a officer trying to do the right thing amongst all the gray, especially being an officer of color. But you just have to be strong enough to fight that off. Police work, just like say being in the military, you rely so much on your fellow officers just to get through the day. And I've seen it. I've been a part of the raft of it, where you just don't get that support because you're doing quote unquote the right thing and you're not participating in such acts. So much so I have even been in trouble because I just stood up to what was right. That's just how I was raised in my house. When I saw someone on the street, I saw my own family members, no matter what color. So, you know, my conscience always kicked in. But some officers aren't as strong, and they can't fight through that, even if they're not participating. But the thing that will change is if you hit people in their pocketbooks and hold them accountable, just like the pastor said, the reverend said, to the same standards as citizens. Now, one thing I will say, when we are taught CPR, you know, they always tell us, and anybody who knows CPR, if you're acting in good faith to try to save someone, you're acting under a cover where, you know, if you accidentally, you know, maybe break somebody's rib trying to give them CPR, then you're covered. If that coverage is lifted, then maybe some people might not be apt to participate. And I'm just putting that out there. But yes, you have to do the right thing. This blue shield, you know, has to be broken. And I think with the body cameras and with the accountability that's being elevated, I think it will change, because people, they respond to when they're hit in the pocketbook, unfortunately.
Sure. Thank you for those for your candor. All right, so I want to give this was kind of a little bit of a heavier one, so in case anybody has anything else they want to throw in at this point, I just want to give you the opportunity.
I'll just say this one thing. Because I did work in Philadelphia in an urban environment, a lot of times you do run into the people who you are servicing. And on more than one occasion, I've ran into people off duty. And of course, I didn't remember them, but they remembered me. So that was always my accountability. If I treated them okay, which I always did, it was no problem. And that's where I always saw that paranoia with people who didn't necessarily treat people the right way. Because they were always, us against them and this and that and looking out because they weren't doing the right thing. They weren't treating people the right way.
Thank you.
If I could just underscore and highlight and circle that with a red pen real quick, because I think, oftentimes one of the big pieces of the work we do is about communities taking responsibility for ourselves and trying to do a lot of the things that are currently in law enforcement's hands, right? We tend to call law enforcement for everything. And I think we as communities need to begin to take a tremendous amount of responsibility and resolve things internally. So a lot of the anti-violence work and violence interruption is really key to all that. But what the lieutenant said was really critical, because the power of the Black officer that is connected to the community, and it doesn't always translate, right? But the power of being from the community, seeing people as family, right? Not being afraid to be in the community when you're off duty, you have a built-in sense of accountability because you feel connected to. And so that's a vast difference between, I think we really need to get to, because I think we get to this place of community, whether community-based policing literally comes from community, or whether it's community actually being in law enforcement, I think it achieves the same goals. I always say to folks, I'm in this police accountability piece, and sometimes people want to misconstrue and just call you anti-police, but my father was military police. My uncle was the first Black corrections officer in the state of New Jersey. My Kappa son is Homeland Security. And my cousin, one of my close cousins, was a Newark police officer and detective until he retired and so I have a lot of connections to law enforcement, and I see how they see situations much differently because they are connected inherently to the community because of who they are.
If I could just say one thing, I remember when I was in the police academy in Philadelphia, and the police academy was up in the farther Northeast, and they were telling us about, when we had to go to court. It was down in City Hall in Philadelphia, and they asked us how many people know where City Hall is, and there were a large number of officers that didn't know where City Hall was and never had been downtown in Philadelphia. But these are the officers that are going to be assigned to those urban neighborhoods, and they're going to come down and they're going to play, right? And then they're going to go back to their little neighborhoods, and they're not going to be impacted by that. And I'm not saying that you should buy a house in the worst neighborhood to raise your kids, but there has to be some kind of connection to those people and to those areas. But I see it so many times.
I have a question for you, Lieutenant Massenberg, again. So in my time in the Marines, right, my experience was that, if somebody stepped out of line, made the Marine Corps look bad, you tarnished the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, it was other Marines that jumped on you first. There wasn't like there was that thin blue line there like there is for police. Like we got on you first, and we took care of that situation. So the public never had to get involved or didn't have the chance to come in and regulate us. We self-regulated. Are you seeing any change with these reforms that are starting to happen? Is the culture for the police department starting to change, do you think?
I'll give you, well, I have two unique perspectives because I was, a police officer with Philadelphia and then of course with the state police over here in New Jersey. New Jersey is just like the Marine Corps. We take pride in the uniform from day one in the academy. You know what you can and can't do. And you don't break rank, you stay in formation, and you do the right thing all the time because you do not disgrace the outfit, right?
That's the state troopers you're talking about, the New
Yes, the
Jersey
state
State Police. All right.
And but I have seen it, and I have talked to some officers who said that, because I asked one of my former coworkers, I said, in Philadelphia, I said, what do you think the problem is? This was just last week. I said, what do you think the problem is? Is the problem like the crime escalating, or it's just the police are out of control? And they said both. She's a supervisor, and she said, they don't, my subordinates don't even want to listen to me. They're telling me what they will do and not do and this and that. And then of course, the level of frustration with the citizens is at a high level. So nobody has any trust and any competence in anyone. So I see two different perspectives there.
It's tough. All right. Well, so does anybody have any final comments on this one, on the on this particular holding officers accountable the same as the officer that committed the offense if they don't stop it or report it? All right, we'll move to the next one. Thank you all. That was really good. So this one is require officers to complete use of force reports whenever they threaten to use force. All right, right now, just to catch everybody who's watching up to speed, there was already, Jersey City required all uses of force to be reported to prosecutors at a certain, on a certain schedule, right? Now the Attorney General has said within 24 hours of any use of force, starting back since last October, the uses of force will be reported to this use of force portal that he's got open for the entire state. And then you or I could just go right on the website and check those out within 24 hours of after when they happen. This all was, I think, stemmed from the NewJersey.com compilation of 2012 to 2016, where they put together those 5 years, and everybody could go on there and see the use of force statistics that they put together from arrest forms. So now the state said, well, instead of doing it that long, difficult way, the Attorney General said, no, you'll report them and they'll be public knowledge. What we're asking for here is to go a step further, that even when you threaten to use force as an officer, then that would have to be reported. So this one I've gotten some different reactions from. And by the way, I just want to say, we forgot, I forgot to mention that in our research, we talked to a lot of police officers. In fact, number 2 was one of their ideas. The whole liable administratively the same. They thought the same as you. Hit them in the pockets, it'll change behavior. Number 3 was met with some different, kind of like, so I'd like to hear your thoughts from the panelists on whether this is going too far whenever they threaten to use force instead of just when they use it.
I don't think it goes too far. It may require a lot of paperwork because they may threaten to use force a lot just to, try to get someone to adhere to what they're saying. But I think that, when there's documentation, there is a chain, and you can go back to that documentation and say, well, you know what, you have a history of threatening the use of force, and maybe that history is to a certain particular area in Jersey City, or a certain particular neighborhood, or certain people who are Black and brown, or Black and brown males. So I think that documentation could kind of cipher out, or give us a little extra information about who are the demographics of the people that you're constantly threatening this type of behavior to. So I know folks will complain about paperwork and time management and all of that, but sometimes when you have not sometimes, but all the time, when you have a history of documentation, that documentation can tell a story that needs to be told. So I think it's necessary, although it may be an inconvenience to some.
Yeah, I would totally agree with all of that. And I think as an advocate, right, I have I have the luxury to always, pull as far. And I mean, just to play devil's advocate, which I never do in this situation, but I just to keep it real, right? Like I'm not sure practically how that can even be enforced. Not saying that it can't, but I think just for terms of discussion, I think it could be useful for this discussion to talk about practically how can that be enforced. Like I feel it's almost as how can you guarantee or how do you encourage or use carrots and sticks to even make sure when something was just done verbally that it does become reported? And I'm not sure, at least and I mean that's somewhat of the situation with the actual use of force, but at least once an incident happens, there's several other components that I think can help substantiate or make sure to some degree, because I'm sure the use of force reporting is underreported. So my fear from a practical aspect is that when it's a verbal situation, that would even be way more underreported and become very hard to enforce.
Brother Massenberg, you're the expert in this field. What do you think?
I will say, first of all, I think New Jersey as a whole, coming from the Attorney General's office, does a very good job with the use of force. I started my policing in 1989, so I saw the transition of when there was no reporting to, gradual reporting of use of force. And the state police specifically, that's all I can really talk about, has, a very good use of force reporting policy. From what the pastor was saying, though, from a practical standpoint, the threat of use of force might be a little tricky because as an officer, I mean, I'm a 5'10", 170-pound guy, right? So the threat of force, without even saying anything and not physically threatening anybody, you just being there as a presence with your uniform, is that considered to be a threat? I'll just give you, because I'm retired and I can full disclosure, working a Giants game. And they called us up to the cheap seats, and it was the guys had too much to drink and they were out of control. And we were called by the fellow patrons. And it was 4 guys, and I put my arm around the one guy, and he was tight. He was ready to go. He had his beer muscles ready to go. And from my peripheral vision, I saw everybody with their cell phones out. These are the same people that called us, right? And I was a supervisor, and I told the guy I was working with, I said, just don't get involved in anything. Hold on to the railing because it's kind of steep up there. And I just whispered some sweet nothings in the guy's ear, right? Not cussing, not anything, no profanity, but just very stern. And he came to his senses, and we all walked down together. Now, I think I de-escalated the situation. So the threat of, force, I don't know what that means.
No. So to clarify this would be, in full disclosure, this goes with number 1, the requirement to de-escalate, right? So it would be clearly defined as in, you're actually threatening to use force. Like if you step over that line, I'm gonna take you to the ground. I'm going to hit you. I'm going to strike you or something like that, right? What we'd be asking, because we feel like that kind of, those direct threats only escalate situations. Yeah. So if you're able to basically be forcing officers to restrict the times when they actually need to threaten the use of the force to the time when it's really worth doing the paperwork.
I think you should always try to de-escalate, like was said earlier. Distance and time is always good, but there's always, as we say, those 1%ers that are out there that nothing works. They actually are waiting. They have trophies at their house when they fought the police. So that's not going to work. Now, I remember years back when the troopers went into Camden, and when promotional positions became available, those troopers, they weren't getting the promotions because they had more use of force reports than the normal trooper, because they were in the battle in Camden, right? Running and chasing the guys and whatever, and we were just on the road stopping cars. So on paper, it looked like, their stuff was a little elevated and it was up more scrutinized. But I believe, yeah, sure. Use of force. We, as a state police, we do a good job with that. I think everybody, when they first came out, it was a little bit of a growing pain because it's a little bit more paperwork. But it actually helped the officers, the troopers, to think about it, because they knew, okay, if I go to that next step unnecessarily, I'm going to have to fill out a use of force. And then, of course, the sergeant's going to have to review the tape and then make a decision on whether, it was justified or not. So it gave them that extra minute to think about what they were doing.
Right. And that's what, so that 1% you were talking about, I mean, you're gonna have to go to use of force anyway. You're gonna be filling out reports anyway, right? So our thing is, if you add the threat, right, that forces officers to be more careful when they actually threaten it, instead of getting escalating the situation unnecessarily.
Correct.
So yeah, that was my comeback when some of these officers said, "Man, you know how much paperwork I'd be filling out?" I said, "Well, if it's not important enough to fill out paperwork for, then do you really have to use the force?" Right. And couldn't you just change your words to be more respectful? It wasn't directly
It's better than
implicated.
filling out paperwork when you're
Right.
seated, right? So it's
Right.
better than that. Yeah.
Right. Well, does anyone else have anything on this one before we jump to the next one? All right. So we're right here. We just finished with 3. Here goes 4. Ensure that every officer that interacts with the public is properly equipped and trained to comply with JCPD's body-worn camera policy, and that appropriate disciplinary actions taken against any officer that violates the policy. This isn't going to be, this one is more discussion-wise. I mean, it's kind of like another softball, right? We all agree there's already a body-worn camera out there. I guess what I'd like us to address, if anybody has knowledge of it, how far are we with this? For a while, the body-worn camera policy has been out for quite a while, and there weren't enough cameras to outfit every police officer. And then I'm not sure that there is in the policy a concrete enough measures. There's no, the enforcement measures might be lacking. So if anybody wants to weigh in on that.
I think this is more of a budget issue, like you just kind of alluded to. Maybe all officers aren't outfitted. You have some maintenance issues and technical issues, so it's more of a budget issue, a technical thing. I think at this point, I don't think any officer is uncomfortable with the body cams, because the body cams work both ways. There have been allegations, on both sides, and it has saved officers from that unnecessarily scrutiny when the tape is played, that it didn't go down like the citizen said, and then vice versa. If you're doing the right thing, it's nothing to worry about. I remember when we first got the MDT cameras, the mobile cameras in the cars, and I was uncomfortable. I started actually acting like a robot when I was going up the cars, and I was like, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything. You know what I mean? I like to talk to people, but gradually I got used to it. And, it just wasn't even there after a while.
What about the second part, though? Do you think that right now, I guess the fear is we have the body cams on, and then somebody goes to do something, where they're about to get into a shady situation, or they're about to do something shady, and maybe it gets flipped off, or they forget to turn it on. Is that a problem? Is that something that there needs to be special enforcement provisions built in? Or
I mean, I've been out of the loop a little while. I think some of the cameras, I mean, if they're not on, you get in trouble, right? But you said it, if you're doing something shady, well, if you're doing something shady, that you're doing something shady. So you're already in violation.
Pam, what do you think about in Jersey City body cam issue? If you're aware, where are we at on that? Are they using them regularly?
So, I mean, in Jersey City, we did have some issues with body cams. I mean, in 2019, we had two young men, two youth shot in Arlington Gardens. You know, and the detail unit was a housing unit, and they did not have body cam. Even though we were told the year before that all officers had body cam. But it wasn't until this incident happened and the community demanded to see the body cam of how these two young men born and raised in Jersey City were shot for playing with fireworks that they mistook for gunfire. And so then we were told, oh, well, you know, there's an issue with maintenance, and there's an issue with storage, and there's an issue with, you know, folks putting it on the charger overnight, and there's an issue with having enough for folks to you know, make sure that we have all officers with body cams. So the community didn't find out that we actually didn't have body cams until an incident happened where we demanded to see the body cam footage. As far as I understand, and I mean, I know we have Councilman at Large LaVarro on the phone, on the call. He may be able to say something that I can't, because he knows the budget and knows what they're approving. But as far as I know, as my meeting that I had not too long ago with Chief Moody, that all officers and all detail units now have body cams. I know that there was an issue of shortage in body cams, and so they started putting two officers in a car as opposed to one officer, and making sure one of those officers had a body cam. But I said, so if one officer runs left and one runs right, whoever has the body cam doesn't see what the other officer is doing, so that doesn't make sense to me anyway. But as far as I know, every officer in Jersey City has a body cam. However, I'm not internally, you know, approving budgets, so I'm not sure yet about that.
Yeah,
Julio, there was a question in regards to it, and I don't think we can answer it here. Someone's aware of it. If the body cam is deactivated in real time, like, is someone aware of that?
right. That
And
came
also
from Councilman LaVarro.
Yeah, also Julio, if you can spotlight the speakers when they.
You know, I've done it on mine, and I don't know why. That's what I said before. I have speaker view enabled on mine, and I don't know why it's not doing that for everyone.
Okay.
So I think everyone can just manually go in on your view and highlight speaker form, but mine is that way. So I apologize. I don't know if it's because I started recording before I did that. Maybe that's it.
So I do know that if an officer's body cam is deactivated, it's not an alert that goes out. They will figure that out once they look at the whole footage of the body cam. If somebody's looking at it, there's no alert that goes out to say he deactivated the body cam.
And there is, and just there's another question in the chat from Councilman LaVarro as to what does proper training to comply with General Order 619 look like? Well, you know, as far as that goes, it's provided for in the order. I wouldn't be able to tell you offhand right now exactly what it is, but it is pretty thorough in how they map out what's supposed to happen. The issue that we have is more with, for a long time, there just weren't, as Pam said, all those issues with the body cams, with enough equipment being around. But what I'm also concerned about is as usual with, you know, with any SOP, the SOP is only as good as the consequences. So if it's not being enforced, and if it's not being enforced, you know, strictly or adequately, then it's worth nothing. Also, I just want to, by the way, if you're typing questions in the chat, we are keeping track of them. There will be time at the end. We'll fit them in if we can organically during the middle of these conversations. But I did want to point back to something Edward Perkins said when we were talking about the prior thing about the threat of the use of force and the enforcement that Reverend Boyer brought up. You know, and again, if your body worn camera policy is working as it should be, then you won't have people violating SOPs about reports, because all it takes is somebody to say, hey, this police officer threatened to break my arm, right? And then there was no report, and you go back to the camera and you can see that the police officer did do that. So these go hand in hand. A lot of them are like domino effects. That's very important.
I'll say this: if you want to have a credible department, you have to hold yourself accountable, right? So we have units that actually the supervisors review the tapes. You know, they review the tapes. When you come in, it doesn't have to be an incident. They'll just pull a tape and they'll review your stops, make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. You have your hat on, you're saying what you're supposed to say, polite. Um, and if you don't do that, then gradually you will start declining in your procedures, policy and procedures, and to the point where you know you're put under pretty much like probation. We have something that's called CALEA, and CALEA pretty much gives you your accreditation for all law enforcement, right? So you want to be accredited, just like when you go to college. You want to go to a college that's accredited. So you have to set some SOPs and some procedures, and you want to make sure that they are being followed, and so you can maintain your credibility. Because it all comes down to lawsuits that's going to pretty much deplete the city's budget.
Reverend Boyer, what are you seeing on the state level? Is this an
Yeah.
issue?
Yeah, very much so. So in November, the governor signed legislation requiring every uniform officer in the state to wear body-worn cameras. And there was a $58 million appropriation to do so. I sat on a working group, the governor's working group, about the implementation of this. And we worked through a report, which also included the recommendation that disciplinary action will be taken for officers who turn off cameras. It also addressed things like centralized cloud-based storage to deal with the storage issue. And so many of these pieces are worked out there again. And so we concluded that work a couple of months ago. So I think it goes for review ultimately, and you'll probably see that report in, I would think, somewhat soon, which will help give, I think, a lot of guidance here. But again, even in these working groups, 9 times out of 10, all the recommendations and everything are taken. But for those who are advocates, it still falls on us to be diligent and to be passionate to not only make sure that the accountability measures which are in place in these kind of pieces go forth, but also to be critical of these reports to make sure that they go even further. So we should always be pressing. But I do think it gets at the largest issue around having the cameras available, the money for storage, whether they're turned on, in what situations can the data be withheld, how long before the footage is made available. All of those things are addressed through the new law and the recommendations coming from the working group.
Roger, thank you. And that's really what we're asking for here. We just want teeth to some of these requirements, because without those, they're worthless. So it really is important that our council persons are aware of that. And thank you again, Councilman Navarro, for coming for attending this event, and also for being so proactive in looking at trying to take measures to make sure these things get implemented. So does anyone have anything further on this one before we move to number 5? All right. This is a big one. These were under the umbrella of ending for-profit police policies. And we can tackle these kind of one at a time. First of all, if you ask most police in the state, they'll say there are no quota programs, right? For things like issuing tickets and all that stuff. But what we do have are incentives that happen in other forms that basically end up functioning like quotas. And actually, I'll kick it over to the experts. And Brother Massenberg, what do you think? What are some of these that come to mind?
I've never been encouraged to write a certain amount of tickets or bring in a certain amount of people. There's never been any official kind of standard to that. But what I was always told was, like say when you come in from your end of shift and you didn't have anything on your report, like on your log, sometimes it's like that. You just don't have anything on there. And they would call them a floater, right? And they say, well, you didn't see anything tonight. You didn't see anything. I said, nope, didn't see anything. Right. And it was like, okay, but you can't ride around and not see anything, even if you're just like, helping a lady cross the street or whatever. You have to be involved with the community. But systemically, there are ways to earn extra money through making arrests, and then you have to go to court. So I guess that's a systematic thing. And of course, officers know how to work the system. So yeah, but it's rooted in the system of it. Now, a lot of what I've
You're talking
heard,
like overtime, by the way, right?
overtime,
But like
yes.
you go to court, you get the overtime for it.
Right. Now, a lot of what I've heard now is a lot of officers are getting their shifts adjusted. So it's not that incentive to, write tickets to go to court or whatever. You just have to adjust your shift. But there's never really been a heavy emphasis on like that incentive to generate activity, if I could say it that way.
Wait, do any of the other two panelists have thoughts on this?
I definitely think in a lot of urban cities, there is an incentive, even if, it's not called an incentive. Like I know, like in Jersey City, folks get a lot of summonses for a lot of things. And those folks usually look like me, except they are Black males, and they usually don't have the means to pay for these summonses. So they turn into warrants, which then turn into incarceration, which then turn into contributing to the mass incarceration of Black men. So I think that in a lot of cases, there is a lot of profiling that happens. There is a lot of summonses that are given, even after, folks were told to look at marijuana in a certain light and not, case people up because of it, especially if it's a small amount, if it's a usable amount. But we still found Jersey City youth and young adults who were given summonses after we were told by our administration that the prosecutor's office was not going to do that. And that they were instead going to make sure that they don't, give out those summonses, but talk to individuals and try to come up with some type of alternative as to how they deal with things. And so I think that it definitely stems from leadership and how leadership paints different communities. We just had in Jersey City where our mayor went on a podcast with Black law enforcement and said, they were talking about crime and talking about the violent crimes that are happening in Jersey City and how it's unaddressed. And he basically said, well, the crime is Black on Black. Those are his words. And that these individuals are homegrown. And it sent the message to say that you should be looking at these individuals because they are destruction in their own communities. And so that was the incentive given to law enforcement to then go out and do something to make sure that they're controlling that community. It gave a bad message, and those are the incentives and the language that we have to look for when we're trying to define how ignorance is promoted in any city, and how our leadership can then, say things and even push the envelope to appeal to people who think that, there is a such thing as Black on Black crime, that there is a such thing as, individuals terrorizing their own communities when crime is about proximity. And we never say anything about white on white crime or any other crime. So I feel like there are incentives all over the place to police more, to do more, and to be more when you're trying to control an area or a neighborhood who you deem out of control.
I agree with everything you said. I just don't think that incentive is related to the officers making a profit. I believe it's related to just what you said. It's pretty much racism. But I just don't think the officer thinks, well, if I lock this guy up, I can put some more money in my pocket. I think it's directed towards just that, what you said, just the racism. But I agree 100% on what you said.
Absolutely, King. Thank you.
Potentially stepping on one of the other points later. So I'll just.
Oh, please. All of these are actually, they
Yeah.
all kind of go together. So they're fair game.
Yeah.
I'll share them on the screen again for everybody's.
Yeah, so I would argue law enforcement as a whole is a for-profit enterprise
Hmm.
that on the backs of Black people. Not 80 to 90% of the things that are called into 911 are nonviolent. And so when we think about the huge amount of dollars that law enforcement, that police get, and the huge amount that they take up in the public safety budget, and the huge incentives in the drug war, dollars given from the federal government to enforce drug laws amongst mostly Black people, even though drug use is very similar. That in of itself, policing in and of itself, is a for-profit industry where all kind of people are making money. We spent billions and billions of dollars enforcing the drug law, the drug war, something that should be mostly addressed through health, because as we've seen, all of those dollars has not substantially changed drug use at all. Sister Johnson brought up the whole issue of marijuana, where we saw that disproportionate enforcement. I would also say if you go into any white municipal, mostly into the municipal court of a mostly white town in New Jersey, you will see mostly Black people in those courts, because the way that Black people are stopped and enforcement and tickets and summonses are written for people who are commuting through the town. In March of 2020, North Brunswick, for instance, a reporting came out that showed how they hunted at the border and they ticketed Black and Latino folks who drove through the town. I grew up in Plainfield, New Jersey. I was never pulled over by a Plainfield police officer, but I spent nights after night after night in the holding cells in Westfield and Cranford, in Summit, in Mountainside, because I was a Black man driving through as a young man. And so the municipal budgets are profit incentivized because of all of the tickets and the summons and all the pieces that come back to municipalities from ticketing. If we begin to redefine law enforcement, because most of the actions, the situations where force take place, a lot of those situations take place in circumstances which started as nonviolent to begin with. And when we're talking about situations like substance use, mental health, youth, why do we have somebody with a gun showing up in the first place? And it is because the law enforcement lobby is so strong. No one wants to really deal with the fact that we have basically given over billions and billions of dollars to an entity where on the violent crime side has failed horribly, because the majority of violent crimes and murders and whatnot go unsolved. So if any of us in our respective fields fail to do the most critical things as much as law enforcement, but received a huge amount of dollars to do things which typically, if we had the systems in place, really don't require, where we really need someone who is mental health equipped, who is youth equipped, who is social service equipped, who is substance use equipped, we'd be run out of town. So we need to rethink the law enforcement, the prison industrial complex. It is all profit driven. And whether I mean, it may not technically be for profit, but everybody profits from it who lives off of it. And I think we need to really think about it that way.
Pastor, you're absolutely right. On the higher level, you are absolutely right. And we all know when we're going on vacation, when we go through those smaller towns, that we got to be extra careful, right? So you're absolutely 100% right. You know, on a bigger scale, the whole system needs to be just stripped down and rebuilt.
Wow, and so that's deep. So on the for-profit policing policies, maybe another thing I could throw in there, if y'all are aware of it, the you know, sometimes the state does these hey, our cause this month is going to be drunk driving, right? So we're going to fund any police department extra overtime pay if they need it for this particular cause. So then what happens? right? Everybody's a bunch of more stops. And to fund the
Well,
overtime.
we're coming up on Memorial Day, so we have the holiday patrols, which focus on the speeding and the drunk driving, and they're federally funded. I mean, of course, it does help just slow people down and the critical accidents out there, but it is a profit. You're right, there is a profit. I would like to see, especially in the smaller towns, they're more sensitive, their budget's a little bit more sensitive. But if they don't generate a profit, they're going to be out of business. So it's always been known that the smaller towns are more aggressive. You go down, they'll like stop you for going 2 miles an hour over, and you're like, what do you? Because they need it.
Or, yeah.
I mean, it's funny to me when I get stopped because I got all my stuff, so they can't do nothing to me. I mean, they could if they wanted to, but it's going to be a problem. But it's like, what are you doing? I'm going 2 miles an hour over. Like, they're just so aggressive because they just need to get that income into the town to keep it going.
And I'll offer this one other example that I failed to lift up earlier. There was a bill in the New Jersey legislature, as we saw everything going on with voting in the United States, right? There was months ago, there was a bill in the legislature to remove police from the polls, right? Because of intimidation, right? In Black communities. And we had Black legislators pull back and push against it because either they themselves or law enforcement connected with them said that's how we get overtime during that time of year. So these are the things we have to think about, and these are the things that are playing themselves out all across the state.
I'm all for paying police officers, for the hazards that they suffer in the normal course of their duties, but not incentivizing them to make extra arrests or stop more people for no reason. And one last thing I'd like to bring up, when you, Brother Massenberg, when you were saying, the whole somebody that's not writing tickets or somebody, what are you doing if you come off a shift and you haven't written any tickets or anything like that? I read an article by an Alabama former police chief who in his town actually said, I don't care. That's not going to factor into your ratings at all. What I care about is if crime is going down, everybody in this department is going to get good ratings. And he focused on that. So the presence of a police officer who's there and keeps his community from bad stuff happening, that's rewarded, not how many tickets you wrote.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's different ways to be involved. And, you can write people a warning, right? Maybe you didn't stop cars, but maybe you just handle more calls. But the tickets has always been the golden goose. It's like, how many, you wrote 2 books tonight, that's the golden goose.
Right. Yeah. Well, are we, so on this one, I'll just kind of throw it out there. Any one of these 4 things, actually, this requiring police department budgets to bear the cost of misconduct, right? We've touched on this a little bit. Or maybe we haven't, but this is not necessarily the for-profit part, but it plays into profit, period. Right now, most departments, most cities have this slush fund or whatever fund that when they get sued over police misconduct, right, it's coming from the city. It's not coming from the budget of the police departments. Is it fair to force those police departments to bear the budget of the brunt of the settlement out of their own budgets instead of the cities?
We should put an end to qualified immunity, and then the folks who actually break the law would be, responsible for paying out those payments. We've had several payments given to individuals who were abused by the police, who proven in a court of law, and those are the taxpayers' responsibility. And they are not the police department's responsibility, nor are they the officers' responsibility. And I think in turn that is a big problem. And we should not have to pay for anybody else's mistake, especially when you're in such a great position as being a police officer. and you abuse that authority. And so now as a city, folks who are, some of those folks who are struggling to keep their homes have to then pay for your mistakes. And I think that's it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I definitely totally agree with that. We've hit some practical. We've been working on this bill on the state side, and it brings up some very interesting and practical complications. Like one, where we are fighting ultimately to make sure that individual officers are held liable, but typically those dollars will not be enough to actually take care of the thing that they're being sued for, right? So it actually can be a disservice to the person who's seeking remediation. But it should be there because we need that kind of, if officers feel no financial hit, then so it's a strange issue, because ultimately it probably has to be some combination of both in order to achieve what everybody's ultimately trying to get at. I mean, there's at the end of the day, I think that also this issue about licensing officers gets at the same piece. New Jersey is one of the only states as well that there's not a licensure system. And I think tying that to police accountability is critically important. But I will always say, and I'll repeat in probably almost every point, is that I think the key to all of this is drastically reducing what police do. And the more that we do that, the more we can shift resources to other places. But we do need to take that pension if you are found to have violated the public's trust. Absolutely.
Can you explain this is the first I'm hearing, unless I'm just not understanding what you're saying, the licensure issue?
Yeah, so just like doctors have to be licensed, lawyers have to be licensed, right?
Okay.
For most professional, because the license situation holds a standard, and if you violate the standards of being licensed, then you can't just leave this one place and go to this other place. Okay. And so if you have to be licensed, and then you also have much more strict pieces in order to maintain your license, like those other professions. And so to have your license stripped, now I can't just leave Camden, where I beat somebody down, and get a job in Jersey City because I don't have a license.
I totally understand that, and I agree with that. And I heard you mention pension. We had an officer, Sergeant Ransom, who actually ran an individual over in Audubon Park, which was filmed, and the video was released to Telemundo, who then made the community aware that this white officer, Sergeant Ransom, ran over a Black young man who he suspected of making a drug deal, and chased him. But instead of chasing him on foot, he chose to take his vehicle and go over the curb into a park where children were playing, and ran the young man over. Now, he was forced to resign, right? Basically, he was forced to resign because it was all on video. However, he kept his pension. He was not, and he kept his pension, but he was prohibited to having a law enforcement job any place else. But he still kept his pension, as if he retired doing something marvelous.
Yeah, no, and I'm in 1,000. He should not have his pension, and whatever his pension was, I'm just making up numbers because I don't know, but let's say he had $500,000 or $1 million in his pension. He should have lost that. It should have went to the brother he assaulted, but the brother he assaulted probably deserved 5 or 6 million. And if officer such and such is taking 7 years to pay it for whatever reason, the young man should still be made whole even while they're taking that pension away.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right, and that's I think what we're asking for is when that's all said and done, whatever needs to come out of the state side to split that difference, or out of the municipality side, should come not from the city. It should come from the police department's budget, so that they feel it, so that when somebody goes and does something like that, the rest of the police department has an onus to jump on them and say, hey, you messed it up for everybody. Now we're short this because of what you did.
And I think what would be interesting, which I'm just thinking about now, is if police pensions were developed differently, where there was a pool of dollars, a more massive pool of dollars that everybody had to draw from, which technically it is. But if it draw down on everybody, you find all these other pieces we talked about earlier and the other points about internal accountability happen a lot faster.
Yeah, that would be interesting, because I could personally say I wouldn't want to trust my pension with some of the guys that I work with. A couple of things struck my attention. Number one, like when doctors become licensed, they have to get malpractice insurance, right? And I don't know how that would play into police, because if you're trying to get a job, and then you have to get insurance, I don't know how that would play into your recruiting with that. But I remember when I was getting close to retiring, and I was in the office, but I just remember not wanting to do anything on or off duty to jeopardize my pension. Like if somebody just cut me off in traffic, I was like, okay, I just didn't want any problems. You were so nervous because you're almost there. You don't want to jeopardize that. But I don't know if the attacking the police budget would work, because the police budget is so connected to the city budget, and you can't just have the police budget depleted to unfunctionable standard, because it's a matter of public safety and the city would have to step in. So it definitely would come back to the citizens again.
Maybe they're having the extra step of forcing the city to jump in though and save them once they depleted their budget to that. It might make the difference, having to keep coming back to the city to actually get them to bail them out, instead of just saying, well, that's the city's problem, figure it out.
I know there's a couple of towns specifically, like Woodbine, New Jersey, and South Jersey. They had a police department at one time, but I guess there was not enough tax revenue to support the police department, so the state police now covers that area.
Something to think about. Pam, you alluded to this limit fines and fees for low income people. That's exactly what we're saying, is that snowball is a problem, and it's easy to build in, ways to protect people like that. I mean, shoot, the difference between somebody who qualifies for a public defender or not is easily determined all the time in a criminal context. So, putting in exceptions for people with low income is something that we could do. This civil forfeitures thing. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying, absolutely. We work with our prosecutor's office here in Hudson County all the time when it comes to vacating warrants for, low-level crimes or low-level situations. And they've been very good at having those done. And I can definitely say that here in Jersey City. But it's still a problem. They should not be given summonses and tickets at all in some cases, but we see it happen far too often. But thankfully we do have a system in place that we have been able to work with. That doesn't make it all good either. That just makes it okay for us to help the folks coming to us for assistance. But what about those who don't come to us for assistance and just left out to deal with their fines that turn into warrants, that turn into time paid, in jail for something that could have been avoided?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the modern day officer thinks about that. I just remember when I was trained by some pretty good officers. And one of the things that I was told was, be careful when you're issuing summonses to say, truck drivers that has CDLs. He said, because if you do that, then they might lose their job. And then if they lose their job, then they have to resort to another form of income. Not saying that you don't give summonses to truck drivers, but just making it more sensitive to the situation, if that makes sense. You know, but today I think it's just a disconnect. You know, like I said before, like the officers don't live in the town, they don't care, like they don't relate to anything going on when it comes to people's struggles and their issues.
And the last thing here is, this was a complicated subject, the end civil forfeitures without criminal convictions. The New Jersey has made some progress on this, but it's still not, there's still people that basically have to litigate to get their property back, even when they haven't been convicted. And it's a lot to cover here in this forum, but I don't know if any of you has a good knowledge of this that could sum it up in you know, some words. If not, we can move on and cover this.
I mean, very, very briefly for anybody, you know, civil forfeitures, I mean, this plays a lot, especially in, you know, we do a lot of drug policy stuff, and it plays a huge part there. So before folks are actually even convicted of a crime, a lot of their assets can be seized, and in New Jersey, even nationally, a lot of police departments even use those assets. And a lot of folks can't even get those assets back, even if they never had been convicted of a crime, is a lot of what's going on. But there has been some level of trying to restrict the kind of blanket ability to around civil forfeitures. But you're absolutely right. I think you kind of summed it up perfectly, in that there still remains, it isn't as turnkey as it should be, and the more barriers, especially for low income people, the more barriers you put in, the less likely it is for people to actually get their things back.
All right. And so I unless anybody has anything else on these five, I just want to make sure that we're able to hit the others within the time that we have, and get some questions in. So we'll move to number 6. This is another softball, right? The city council of Jersey City recently voted a resolution to support the New Jersey Senate Bill 2656, which, if those of you that don't know, would make internal affairs records for all officers public knowledge. So the city's in favor of it. What we're looking for is the mayor to come out in favor of it, because he has not. Does anybody want to talk about this one?
I'll just say this: anytime I've gotten any, I worked in a compliance bureau where I investigated discrimination complaints with the state police, right? So I was the police of the police, and anytime we work in a partnership, a lot of times with internal affairs, and a lot of times when, you know, we shared reports, you know, they were redacted so heavily, you know, you couldn't halfway make sense out of stuff. So yeah, I do think everything should be, you know, released and transparent. But the police are working for the community. I go back to that all the time. I don't know where we lost that, you know, that we're our own, you know, like our own self-fulfilling prophecy here. Like if without the community, we don't have a job. So we are the community, and we're working for the community. So why can't we share with the community and actually ask for help from the community? The first thing you do, you come in, you say, how can I help you? This is your community. You have a problem. You know it better than me. How can I help you with your community?
I agree with that. You know, I think in so many cases, we've forgotten what public service means, and how we're servicing the public. And you can't have public safety without community involvement. In our fight in Jersey City to create a CCRB, Civilian Complaint Review Board, you know, we received major pushback and things we were asking for, like subpoena power and disciplinary power, and power to see records, and power to interview witnesses, and not us as civilians, but us as having individuals on the payroll who are, experts in the field, right? So I just think that when you seem to be hiding things, it kind of, sends an alarm to the community, like maybe these folks are not really for community, or maybe these folks are not really for the betterment of the people who they serve, or maybe these folks are not actually trying to make sure that we have a harmonizing relationship and that we continue to act as if we have, a superiority, where they're here and we're here and we have to abide and listen. And so I think it sends a bad message.
When I was in Philadelphia, we had one of the worst projects in my district, and the white officers, they would go up there and they was always escalating situations and riots. And I asked the lieutenant, I said, put me up there. I mean, I got to go up there and save them anyway, because they just, so put me up there. And we just had a good time. I learned all the residents. I learned who they were. They learned who I was. Listen, if they got out of line, they knew, right? They knew if they did wrong that they had to pay the consequence of that by, but it was a mutual respect. And it was just no problems at all. I was never afraid. The white officer would come up there and they were like, man, aren't you scared? I'm like, no, because I ain't messing with nobody like that. I'm not abusing people like you guys are. I mean, I had a relationship with my people. This is my area. Like the old school police knew what was going on. They knew you got off the bus at so-and-so time and you went, they knew, right? So we have to get back to that. It's not going to work any other way.
Absolutely. And we can use you in a lot of communities. I wish that you were in our community right now. I mean, when I grew up,
Thank you.
And I know that a lot of our youth don't want to hear things about when we grew up, because it's not what they see every day. It's not, what they're exposed to, and it's not their experiences. But we had community police officers just like you. And we loved and respected them. They knew our parents' names, our grandparents' names, and they knew if you was a knucklehead or not, right? But they still respected you and they handled you accordingly. And it wasn't any type of disrespect or division. And they didn't come into our community like they were militarized. And so we need more. I know you're retired, but if you ever want to come out of retirement, come to Jersey City.
I love Jersey City. I tell you, I would spend a lot of time up there. But no, I think that's just something that has to be. You have to be raised like that, and I just don't. I don't see it with the young officers. Not all, but I like people. So if you don't like people, this is the wrong profession. And I've worked with so many people, so many officers. They really just don't want to be bothered. Like really, when the radio goes off, it's like they're bothering them. This is your job. I mean, full disclosure. I mean, I met my first wife on a call. So if I didn't go on that call, guess what?
We get to learn a lot about you, brother. All right, now I love your full transparency as well.
Yeah, I knew right away. First time I talked to him, I was like, oh, we gotta get him on this panel. Reverend Boyer, you have anything on 2656 you'd like to add? I know you see it from the state level and what it's looking like as far as getting approved.
I mean, one, I'll just share this. I know when the Attorney General was fighting for transparency on police records, he got such major pushback from the police unions. It was, just fascinating. So I'll just say simply that light is the best disinfectant.
Yes,
Well
sir.
put. Well put. All right, let's make sure we get to all of these. So let's move to number 7. Stop purchasing military weaponry. All right. Let me kick this one over to Lieutenant Massenberg first, because we've talked about some of the practical implications.
Okay. I think it's been this has been overused in America. But I remember specifically this one incident when they had the two, I think they were brothers in LA. They robbed a bank, and they had so much weaponry, they outgunned the police. The police were going to local gun stores to actually try to get some more weaponry to kind of stop these guys. They were fully armored. I think there's a small percentage of people like that, but I've been in a situation where I was outnumbered. Like, they had better guns than me and everything, and you just like wow, like, you know what I mean? I think you have to have a reserve, but I think it has to be monitored. I think it has to be governed. I don't think that gate should just be open just to have it. The incident down in Elizabeth City, I believe it was, and it's a shame because there's so many incidents that are running together. When I saw the officers in that pickup truck, that just remind me of something like that my grandmother probably witnessed. You know, but it has to be I think you need some kind of equipment for those special isolated incidents, but I don't think it should be just be available at all times. I think you have to go through a certain checklist, and somebody has to be the gatekeeper for that stuff.
What do y'all see from the activist side? How do y'all see that issue?
I mean, we've had situations in Jersey City where, not too many that I know of anyway, but situations where they, you know, officers were outgunned, and things happened. I just think that I definitely agree with the lieutenant that it should be governed, and I also agree. I also feel like, you know, we should make sure that we're not just padding, you know, the infantry and just like, you know, we're gonna buy everything, because we talk about that when we talk about, you know, mass shootings and how that type of, you know, weaponry was allowed to be sold, you know, and a lot of this is automatic weapons and things of that nature. And so, you know, we don't want folks, you know, assessing that or accessing that, you know, who shouldn't have it. But we also don't want a police force to just simply have a locker full of military, you know, military weapons. So I just think it should be governed, but I definitely think it shouldn't be used unless absolutely necessary. However, I'm not with spending money on things that we may or may not need, as opposed to things that we know we need right now. Like, we know that in order to combat violence, we know that we need prevention measures, right? And I feel like police departments all across this nation are so reactionary to crime and violence. And so they're just responding. And so, you know, yes, you know, they're locking up individuals in urban communities who are committing these crimes and homicides and violence and all of that. But at the end of the day, they're not putting prevention efforts or investing in the work of prevention, which basically does nothing to crime reduction. You know, so I'm gonna hit on this because it really bothers me that when you have a leader of a city go on a podcast and just talk so recklessly. He talked about you know, a homicide being committed on Wilkerson Avenue, which has been a hot spot for the past 10 years. And he talked about police being at the top of the block and at the bottom of the block. But in the middle of the block, the homicide still happened because it could not be prevented by the police, right? And nobody's blaming the police for that, because that's what we've been yelling about and fighting about all summer and all last year, is saying that what we're asking for is, you know, a solution or an investment in the work when it comes to anti-violence and crime reduction and prevention of crime. We're not asking for more police. So you're militarizing our police. We're over-policed in Jersey City on the south side of the town, where violence is concentrated. Violence is concentrated in 16 blocks on the south side. And the only answer we've gotten from folks in power is more police. But if we invest in prevention, and we invest in those solutions with social workers and mental health, mental first aid workers and community organizations and recreation and the health department. Our recreation budget, our health department budget, they were cut. And no money has been invested in that since then. However, folks are talking about growing our police force to 1,000 police officers. For what? If it's not going to help the problem or assist in what the community is going through and the trauma that we're all experiencing. And when we talk about crime and we talk about those hot spots, we're not talking about just one corner. So if one corner on Wilkerson Avenue is the hot spot, we're talking about 20 houses on each side of the street going, going west and then going north. Right. And so then you have at least 80 families who are affected by gunfire on one corner. That happens every other day. It's too much going on to simply say we're going to hire more police. We need investment in the work of prevention.
When I was in right before 9/11, I was in the community policing unit with the state police. And we did a lot of what you said. We would go to the schools, we go to the football games. We even rode bikes with the kids and stuff. And we had an unlimited federal budget. When 9/11 happened, our budget got snatched, and that our money went for all those toys, all that military weaponry. America, all you have to do is instill that thought of fear, and it's over, right? They don't want to hear that you go on playing with the kids. America, through the news and through the media, white America is afraid that we are taking over, and they are trying to push back with any means possible through the police, through all the militias. I'm going to say what it is, right? And that's what we're dealing with. If you can talk to a kid at 7 or 8 years old, you can prevent a whole lot going on. And don't wait till that kid becomes, this hardened criminal by locking them up. And now you're trying to say, oh my God, what do we do? No, but it's fear. It's fear. And America and the news and the government should be ashamed of what they're doing. Be honest with you.
I totally agree. Absolutely agree. And I think that people who speak to that fear, they're just as culpable as anyone who doesn't act because of that fear. So if you're profiling Black men and women walking and looking at birds or in a park jogging or whatever, you're just as culpable as anybody else pushing that narrative that they have something to fear when they look at people who look like us.
I have had arguments over the top of a car with my trooper that ain't going down tonight. And the kids were like, they like the troopers is arguing, like, but it just ain't going down like that. Especially when you're a punk. Let's call it what it is. Especially when you're not built like that. You using this uniform, you was the kid that got your lunch money taken, and now you're gonna be a badass. Not tonight.
I was muted, but when you said that, I said talk about it because that is the truth. And I don't know, like, so I heard you mention State Trooper a couple of times. My uncle John Bolden, who is now deceased, but he was a State Trooper his entire life until he was made to retire because of his age. But that's what he stood for. That pride, that integrity, and proud to be Black. And proud to make sure that he's keeping his people, as you say, your people, because they're our people, under wraps and making sure that we keep them with us and under control. So, and not control in a way to demean them, but in a way so that they can understand, like, right now, it's us and I'm talking to you. And I'm trying to send you a message that's going to be received much differently than my white counterpart.
When I first went through the academy in Philadelphia, I was actually ashamed that I was betraying my neighborhood, right? Because the guys that brought me up, they were in the game, right? And I remember when they found out and they was like, yo, we so proud of you. Just be careful. And I just remember that. And I was saying to myself, be careful from guys like you, right? But then I'm the same guy that's now a state trooper or this or that on my off duty that's being followed through the market by the security guard. So you got to find that balance, because you're gonna always be black. You ain't gonna always be a cop.
Reverend Boyer, we haven't heard from you in a minute. You have anything on this particular issue?
Yeah, I mean, just as a whole, I think what's critical to these conversations, you know, militarization and, you know, the key words that we keep coming back to, right? And the key concepts is investment in resources. I despise when people bring up this false notion of black on black crime, right? I despise it. And because it's a very racist notion, because it acts as if poverty is not the major contributor, right? Poverty is why we see poverty and trauma is why we see what we see in our urban centers, right? And in any impoverished community. And here's the thing. And so that's where we see the most police, right? We already have examples in front of us of the solution. Most affluent white neighborhoods do not have a huge police presence, which lets us know police are not the solution to bring down crime. Resources are. When you have a place where everyone has what they need, good education, good health, mental health, when people have what they need, they do not fight, kill each other to get it.
Too much to lose.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves as a society, you know, as a mayor of Jersey City, when are you going to become an advocate to do what's right by people rather than to continue to feed a mechanism which only exacerbates the problem? Because over policing leads to mass incarceration, leads to the criminalization of people, which exacerbates the poverty issue. And at what point are leaders going to be bold enough to make long-term humanity investments rather than feed into short-term racist fears? Because I tell you this, you take away resources from the wealthiest people in the world and they will kill each other to survive.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's move to the last and final one now. I want to try to get these in before time elapses, but I did want to bring this up real fast. This is the Attorney General's October 2020 directive talking about the statewide Handle with Care program. And the idea is that if law enforcement officers come across a situation where they feel like a minor is in an adverse childhood experience that could result in trauma and scar them for the rest of their life, they refer them to a social worker. So that, you know, if that's implemented properly, it could really go towards the prevention aspect, which would be great. So the last one, and this is right in the wheelhouse of what Reverend Boyer has been talking about all night, is why are we sending the guy with the gun to these situations that involve specialized mental health situations? What we're asking for here is, wherever reasonably possible, to remove policing of social issues from the scope of policing responsibilities. This means promoting funding of social service agencies and implement evidence-based interventions to address substance use, mental health crisis, and homelessness through creation of a crisis intervention team to address nonviolent offenses. Now, crisis intervention is one of those hot button terms that's now being used a lot with policing, right? And I see a lot of police departments going, oh, we have crisis intervention training, we have crisis intervention training, and that's great. That is great that you have an officer that's trained to deal with these situations you might run into, not knowing that they're going to run into it, right? But ultimately, you don't want the paramedic conducting heart surgery, right? You want the paramedic keeping the patient alive so so that the doctor can get there and take care of it. So what we're asking for are crisis intervention teams, which would consist of, and again, not just feeding, because you got to watch about budgetary, giving the police, if you put this in the police department's budget, they could do what they want with it and maybe redirect those funds. So we would want like a task force, right, where it would be police are part of the task force, but also mental health professionals, also people that are substance abuse counselors, people that are specialized in those situations. And they're actually, those mental health workers are like quick reaction forces. They are on call the same way that police are on call. So when police go out there, they're not waiting. The overall complaint I hear a lot of times is, oh, by the time the mental health worker gets there, it's like an hour later and the situation has gotten crazy or out of hand by then. So we'd have these people on standby, and the police's job would be either to in the beginning, when they get there, just make sure nobody's actively inflicting violence on somebody else, and everybody's physical safety is there. They can assure the person who's the subject, they can just say, look, I'm not going to come near you. Don't worry. I'm just here to make sure nothing crazy gets out of hand. And we're going to have somebody else who's not a cop come talk to you. You're not under arrest, that type of situation. That's what we're asking for. So Reverend Boyer, I'll give you first crack at this. I know this is what you've been saying all night.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to take up time because this is really the crux of. So we're doing deep dive work in Elizabeth and in Gloucester County. So Elizabeth, I think, being more representative of our urban centers, Gloucester County, obviously more rural, to work with community members who've been affected by police violence and mental health experts and whatnot, substance use specialists, to actually reimagine and redefine what these kind of responses look like. And so, within the coming year or so, you'll see some reports and some recommendations around that. And it's critically important that we begin to shift this, and how you've explained it is right on target. We have to redefine what public safety is all about. And just like you said, I mean, like as a reverend, right, I have certain qualifications, but I don't have others. And what we have done, and in talking to law enforcement, this is a critical, I've had a lot of conversations with law enforcement over the years, and I have yet to find one law enforcement officer that wants to handle a mental health issue or wants to be the one handling substance use issues. They understand that the law enforcement community, I've heard time and time again, whether it's from officers, prosecutors, and it's very true, because this goes far beyond law enforcement. This is us as a society. We have failed people at every end of at every part of the spectrum, and then it all falls, right? Once somebody has had trauma, and I'm glad you brought up the directive about handle with care. We have neglected people at we've miseducated them. We've stripped them economically. We have failed to deal with trauma along the way. And then when they are in crisis, we give somebody who has very little to no experience, training, education, and we put them into a crisis moment and then expect them to handle it the best way possible. That is the most idiotic, immoral way we can possibly handle any situation. And so we as a society and as communities have to begin to take responsibility for that and unravel this thing, which we have basically given guns and weaponry the license to handle situations we should have handled far more delicately along the way.
Do you agree with that, Lieutenant Massenberg?
Absolutely. I wish I had somebody along with me on a lot of the calls. It's not a good feeling when you get to the location and the house is tore to pieces, and the guy looks like Mike Tyson, and he is having a mental crisis, and you turn around and it's nobody there but you, and you got to handle it.
Yeah, and I know some great officers, including yourself, and and while y'all are able to use your people skills innately to get past those situations, it's not right for society to put you in the position to have to do that when that's not your job, when you're not specifically trained for that. That should be a mental health worker.
Fortunately for me, I guess God was watching out for me, and we all came out arm in arm. But you are absolutely right. And so many officers, I mean, you are nervous. You are very nervous. And so many officers, they succumb to it and just go the easy route. And we see it on the news. Because so many people, like the Reverend said, so many people are suffering PTSD. These kids in urban environments, they got PTSD. I don't care what you say. There's too much going on. And we don't have the equipment. We don't have the tools to try to actually help them with a resolution. We're just putting Band-Aids on it. You know, the best officer in the world, all you're doing is putting a Band-Aid on it, you know? So that would be great. That's half the job, to be honest with you.
Ms. Johnson, closing comments on this one.
I mean, that's definitely needed. You know, before the call, the national call to defund the police, we had been meeting with our local council people and legislators in Jersey City to reallocate funds, because we never said defund, because that scares people, to reallocate funds from the public safety budget simply because it was the biggest budget, right? And so we felt the need to make sure we're making an impact in that area of crime and violence, especially in those areas where it's concentrated, to reallocate those funds to in all of those directions that we're talking about. You know, but you have to have leadership ready to give up the commitment from police unions to their campaign. You have to have leadership ready to be bold enough to say, it doesn't really matter, you know, what you give to us or what backlash we're going to take. We're here to serve the people who elected us in these positions. So at the end of the day, the city controls the budget. And so it's up to the city, and definitely up to the leader of the city, whoever that is in any city, the mayor, to say, I'm going to do just that. I just want to pay homage and respect to the collective that we have in Jersey City, because even though we have yet to get any of that done, there is a collective of organizations on the ground, like Jersey City Anti-Violence, Hudson Partnership CMO, Azabara Insights, and Go Get My Kids. It's a amount of organizations. It's ridiculous how much we've been able to come together to try to make an impact in the areas that we can, sometimes with no budget or a shoestring budget, but we make it happen. However, if we're able to send some of those funds in different directions, and not to us, I think that's a misconception too, that we're asking for funds to be given to us as a particular organization, just in that realm of mental health, substance abuse, recreation, jobs, job training, life skills, all of that. If you give money and resources into those areas, then we can make one hell of an impact, which tells one hell of a story, which can save a lot of lives. And so I think that when we fail to do that, we fail to sound the alarm and say, we have a serious problem here in urban communities across America. And so we have yet to do that in Jersey City, and a lot of other cities, they have yet to do that. But if we look at what's happening in Newark by the leadership of Raz Baraka and by Newark Community Street Team and Newark Anti-Violence Coalition, and how they work directly with the city, and how funds have been reallocated, how a former precinct where there were riots happening turned into healing centers, how they opened up healing centers in every ward to address the trauma that's inflicted on communities day to day. That's the type of progress that we want to see across America.
And I want to go back to something Councilman Lavaro said to me, like in the first time we talked about this. He said, you know, you guys are throwing Jersey City softballs in a way that they should be taking full advantage of, because, you know, like this de-escalation that you're asking for to be put in the SOPs, that's already mandated from the AG, right? And you know, just on this particular subject, to share this with you real quick, I know we're over time, but Attorney General Law Enforcement Directive 2020-14 is directive establishing county-wide working groups to address mental health and special needs populations, and creating the framework for coordinating with the state partners. If you read this through, as these working groups are formed, they are supposed to be looking into the concept of providing funding for what we're talking about. So this is an opportunity for Jersey City to be the leader in this kind of stuff, to at the forefront of it, right? And like you said, Newark is doing a really good job. So Jersey City's gonna have, has some catching up to do. But oh, go ahead.
If I could, I think for
Sure.
the very first time tonight, I'm going to disagree with Sister Pam. In this piece, she said,
Not tonight.
yeah, no, tonight. I'm going to disagree on this one point. You said that those resources would not come back to those organizations that you mentioned. We would argue that those are the very organizations that those resources need to come to, because yes, we need further investment in those realms,
Right.
but the community trusts those organizations. Without the community trust, right, we still get nowhere. And so it is critically important that folks from the community, who understand the community, who the community trusts, who are born and bred in the community, are the ones who are closest to the solutions for that community. They are the ones, and we understand, right? There's a lot of organizations that have been making it work, making bricks without straw,
Right.
also need technical support, right? To build it, to do the background infrastructure stuff, to build up strong organizations, out, because our community-based organizations are so involved in the weeds of keeping disasters from happening every single day, right? They can't be worried, they can't do all the intricate measures to get a gold seal of transparency from GuideStar.
Yeah.
Right. So we also at the same time have to give the structural and infrastructure supports, the technical supports to those organizations so that they can be the flagship organizations in our community, really, that they already are.
And I can't say anything else, but you are right. I guess I only said that because that's a defense mechanism, because every time that folks think that we're at the table, we're advocating for funds to be given to us, and all we're saying is it should be given to this. But you know what? You are right. And I won't say that again. So thank you for reminding me that we are a big piece of the puzzle. Thank you.
And that's why it's up to organizations like ours to make that argument, because we understand that. And that's
right.
part of the very work we're trying to do is because we're very adamant in that, is that those are the organizations that need to be resourced and need the technical supports to execute the work. And so we are with you, and we will continue that fight from what we can from the statewide level.
Thank you, King.
Everybody, this has been amazing. I know we ran over time, but I just didn't, there's no way I was cutting any of you off with some of the gems you were dropping. So we are at the portion where we've gone through everything. Panelists, I can't ask you to donate more time than you've already donated. If you want to stick around for questions, please feel free. But I know that we've been at this for 2 hours, and I really appreciate your time here. But if anybody wants to hang around, those of you in the chat can ask questions, and our panelists could, the ones that are still around can answer them.
I'm here for you. I'm here, brother. I'm here.
Appreciate
Yep,
it.
I'll stick around.
I appreciate it. I don't
Yeah,
wanna
I'll stick around for 10 minutes, but it's way past
Yeah,
my bedtime.
yeah. No, I appreciate
I'm normally sleep by like 8:30. I'm just kidding.
really appreciate
30.
you.
Yeah,
All right now.
I get
You
up.
gotta
I
get your
get up.
rest so you can still fight, baby.
Yeah, I get up early, but I go down early.
All right. Well, real quick. So before we get into the questions, then I will throw this up. If you like what we said here today and you want to petition for these reforms, or go to jerseycitynoops.com. We've got a petition there that just helps, again, kind of slam home that people are interested in this, and you care. You don't have to live, work, or socialize in Jersey City. There's you can check other and just say, hey, I'm a concerned non-resident citizen. So with that, let's get into questions, and I'll people have heard my voice long enough. Mwanza or Jashay, if you want to take over, what good questions came in the chat, please feel free.
Yeah, I'm looking at the questions now. I think we had addressed a lot of them. I think there was a question around how do we address disparities of local police depending on the communities. One example was shared of smoking weed and not being arrested in certain communities in Jersey City and not in others. But I think we addressed that. But if there's any panelists that would like to add any thoughts there.
Well, I'll say I believe that this came from the federal level on the laws and the statutes that pretty much, um, you know, criminalize a lot of the activities and things that were happening in predominantly in our communities. But on a smaller level, we have to have more representation of the communities in which we serve. You cannot have, you have to have appropriate representation of the communities. You cannot go outside of your communities and hire people that aren't representative of those communities. But again, the laws have to be changed to decriminalize some of these activities, and I think they are. Some of them are. I know in Philadelphia they're doing a lot. But yes, that's you have to have laws have to change, and of course you have to have representation.
So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
yeah, I'll just quickly add, you know, we put a lot of energy into the into the cannabis issue here in the state of New Jersey. And I also want to add also for Sister Johnson and the community orgs is that one of the major pieces that we fought for was reparations for cannabis prohibition. And so 70% of the tax revenue is supposed to come back to impact zones. And there's also a social equity tax, excise tax. So Jersey City is one of those zones. And so what's critically important for advocates on the ground as tax revenue begins to be realized is to work with your state representatives to identify programs in Jersey City that should receive dollars from the tax revenue generated by cannabis. And so some of these very things should be that. We are currently leading and part of a coalition called Abolish the Drug War New Jersey, because we don't arrest and we don't arrest people for having diabetes. We don't arrest people for having cancer. So why are we doing it with people who have substance use issues? Right. And so how we handle substance use and possession, which is a major driver, and that was the driver behind the whole cannabis campaign, but it goes beyond that. And if we are to be real, right, drugs have been decriminalized in white communities forever because white folks don't get arrested for it the same way that we do. So we can't look at this like it's some taboo thing because it's all about an enforcement thing. So it's critical that we address the code. Brother Lieutenant is absolutely right. Because another thing that we have to realize is this onus that we constantly put on police. Remember, law enforcement is law enforcement. They're enforcing laws, right? And so the racism starts not even at the law enforcement point. It starts with the racism in the laws. Law enforcement is only enforcing what is in the code. So it's critical that we change the code if we want better outcomes on the law enforcement side.
No, that makes sense. I think there was only two other questions, and so I think this is a short one. Can we dispute untrue police reports? If so, how? I'm not sure if maybe the lieutenant might know in a broader sense, maybe not necessarily in Jersey City, but generally speaking.
Dispute a police report? You can
Yes.
always dispute a police report. First of all, you make sure you always get a copy of the police report, and then it's not hard today because everybody has a cell phone, right? So things are being videoed and captured all the time. So like I tell my kids now, when we're out and about know exactly where you are, date, time, location. If you ever get stopped, know where you are, get the officer's name, and you can document yourself, get the police report. And I think we just had a conversation. I was on another chat roundtable the other day about videoing. You can video the incident as long as you're not obstructing police procedure. I mean, don't stick the camera in an officer's face. But yeah, you can dispute a police report. But I think that's not the problem. The problem is it's the code. So who is going to override a police report unless there is video or there's a blatant disregard for the law? You know, it's like you reporting a judge against another judge almost. You know, but yeah, I mean, we're not going to submit to that. I say document, videotape, and take account of the incident, record the incident, so you do have your own accounts of what happened.
No, thank you. And the last question, Julio, was I'm not sure if this was a comment or a question as it was phrased, but how much would it take for Jersey City Police Department to function efficiently? So I don't know, maybe Pamela, since you've had a lot of discussions with the city council about budgets, you may want to tackle that one.
Definitely, with the budget, I think that, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to be coming up on a new budget soon, if not already. And that is definitely a way to make sure that we have accountability. And another way also, the lieutenant and the pastor, they made sure to reference ways to document or dispute a police report, but also a way to dispute that as well is in court, right? And so you have the right to, not plea out and make sure that you're addressing issues that you are concerned with, that you think or believe or know not to be true incidents of what happened. And so you have a way to dispute that. Unfortunately, that is a process, but that is your right to do that, and you can. I think in Jersey City, it's mainly with the budget. If we're not reallocating funds to go directly into other resources and services to better service our communities and better empower our communities, then we're not really making an impact anywhere as it comes to violence or policing or police reform. So I believe it starts with the budget.
According to Councilman Navarro, he said it's not even currently on the agenda. Again, they're halfway through the fiscal year without an introduced city budget. So,
and that's interesting too, right?
I mean, and this is another thing. If we want to see these reforms, we have to, it says something that one city councilman, found time to come here. Another has definitely been super progressive as well. Councilman Solomon has been very interested in these and backing this as well. But we're not, a lot of the council doesn't seem very interested. The mayor doesn't seem very interested. We have, a minority of people trying to fight for these reforms. And then maybe the answer becomes we need more people in those positions to fight for these reforms.
Absolutely. And I think that also we have to get national organizations aligned with us, right? We packed city council chambers. We packed Zoom sessions of city council meetings throughout the pandemic with hundreds of people speaking towards, reallocating funds, a CCRB, talking about school funding and how our kids have been definitely not given what they should have been given when it comes to their education and a quality education or, quality of life. And so I think that, when we're advocating for this, we have to get our national organizations involved so they know that there is a fight and the fight is going to continue. I mean, Black folks, and including myself and my elders, and we fight for everybody else's rights. We're always in tune with the rights of everyone else. And it's time to hold everyone else accountable for fighting with us.
Absolutely. By the way, we would be remiss, Councilman Navarro showed up, and we'd be remiss to not give him the opportunity if he wants to, to address, um, you know, everybody here. If you want to unmute yourself, sir, and anything you want to say, not to put you on the spot, but,
Sure.
I didn't want to give you that.
I'll be
Councilman
very
Navarro,
brief.
before you go, let me just,
Yeah.
I want to say this as well. Councilman Navarro, Councilman at Large, Rolando Navarro, has been an ally to the movement and an ally to many organizations fighting for a lot of things in Jersey City, and definitely things that could move our community forward. When we say that we're the most diverse city in the country, right? But we don't act so diverse. We're not taking up issues for Black and Brown people and for a lot of other cultures and races, right? Ethnicities. We're not doing that. And he and both Councilman Solomon have been the two of the 7-2 vote, right? So there's normally a 7-2 vote. 7 vote with the mayor and 2 stand with the people.
When I
And
told you that one
is
of
unacceptable. And so I just want to commend Councilman Navarro and Councilman Solomon for their due diligence and just for stepping out when it's not so popular to be on the front line of the right side of history. So thank you.
And when I told you that 2 councilmen approached me after we reached out to the city council, you called out exactly who they were. And by the way, Councilman Solomon personally reached out to me and told me he couldn't come. A couple other council members did, to be fair, did also reach out to me and tell me that they couldn't come and express their regrets. But it seems like, two people are showing through their actions. So, why are they on an island by themselves? That's what I want to know. But I'm sorry, sir.
That's $1 million question. It's why people are on an island on this. I'll be very brief. I just want to say, Pam, thank you. And Pam's been advocating for violence prevention funding and work in the streets in our neighborhoods in Jersey City. She's an inspiration to me. And I just want to thank the panelists and yourself, Julio, for your advocacy in this matter. In advocating for change. You all have said so much already, and I think here in Jersey City, my last post there, we tried to reallocate literally a paltry $5 million in last year's budget out of a $650 million budget to reinvest it in our communities, including violence prevention, mental health services, and education, et cetera. We face a huge $80+ million reduction in our school funding from state aid in this fiscal year coming up, and expect to see in the fiscal year after that over $100 million more in reductions in state aid. Our situation, despite what a lot of other officials will say, is pretty grim, and it's grim for. It's bad for the south side of Jersey City, for Black and Brown communities, and because the disinvestments are there, and in the meantime, we see in Jersey City kind of all these investments, and folks have said it more eloquently than me, frankly, about all the investments in the downtown and the waterfronts and the more affluent communities here in Jersey City. Our priorities are all wrong; they're upside down, and we need to fix that. And I think Julio hit it on the head that. I know this is not supposed to be a politicized event, but we have elections this November, and I would just urge folks to really take note of that and hold people to account, and because that's the only way that real change is going to come about here in Jersey City. So, thanks for all your good work. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well said. So if there's not any other questions in the chat, this might be a good time to end. And thank you all for staying overtime. I just want to say again, our call to action here is, please go to the website, sign the petition. If you're part of a coalition that wants to, to join forces on this, please reach out to us. Again, jerseycitynews.com. And it's if Monta, can you put the email address in the chat as well, in case anybody wants to email us? And last thing, I guess I'll say there was another avenue that we're pursuing as well. This is a ripe time, as I talked about with Councilman Navarro, right? The New Jersey Attorney General's Directive 2020-13 directs a bunch of changes to all the police departments SOPs that are not currently enforced, and most of them, right? They all need revision. So if they all need revision and they're going to institute more progressive reforms, now is the time to get involved. And while they have to revise them anyway, might as well suggest some extra things that we can do to be more progressive, like these 8 reforms. And if you're watching this from another city, now is the time. If you're in New Jersey, especially, now is the time. Take a hard look at your SOPs and figure out what can be improved. And if we can be of any help, if I can be of any help specifically, and if our chapter can be of any help in any way, please reach out. I've already talked to people from different cities that are interested in similar proposed reforms, and I'm more than willing to spend whatever time, whatever my lessons learned are worth, and share whatever knowledge I've also learned from amazing advocates like Ms. Johnson and Reverend Boyer. And also the police officers that have been some of the great suggestions we've had came directly from police officers who want to see their departments improve. And Lieutenant Massenberg, Brother Massenberg, I really appreciate you being here and this candor has been amazing. Thank you all so much. Does anybody want to say any last thing before we end the session?
I just think I spent a lot of time up in Jersey City around 9/11 time. Amazing city. I loved it up there, and I saw how things were developing on the waterfront. I think this is not a Jersey City problem or issue, but it is a national issue, and I'm all in. So I think we just need to really gather the troops and this really just go and try to take this nationally and get people involved, because that's the only way. I think everybody has to get involved. It can't be Jersey City. It just can't be one place here or there. It has to be a national thing. The pressure has to be put on.
Absolutely.
Thank you all so much. So I'm going to stop the recording now. I won't end the session immediately in case anybody wants to reach out to each other for networking purposes or whatever afterwards. But for all intents and purposes, thank you for coming out. This is the end of the presentation, and we really appreciate you. And hopefully this is just another step in climbing this mountain that we need to, summit.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone, and stay safe. And Julio, I'm going to reach out to you. I'm not going to stick around to share information, but I'm going to reach out to you for the information for the panelists and any other folks.
I'm there for you anytime.
Absolutely,
anytime.
brother. Thank you so much, King.